Hustle culture is killing our productivity. There is an entire industry built around the promise of making you more productive. We are busier than ever, yet not necessarily more productive. The rise and grind mentality is turning into an epidemic, and our focus is moving away from work completion and towards being performers in the art of working, or as Tim Ferriss refers to as W4W, work for work's sake. We have forgotten how to be productive, and there is no amount of productivity we could ever hide in. I've certainly tried to do that. I have had templates, courses, content, all trying to be more productive. See, we see this grind culture as something to aspire to, but in its reality, it's not really an escape from the rat race. And I would argue it just makes the wheel spin faster. We all want to be in control of our lives, but if all we're doing is watching others brag about their external success while feeling internally dissatisfied, then we have to ask the question, what game are we playing? Well, we're playing the game of the never-ending game of nearly. High achievers want to achieve, but the flip side of that coin is becoming very much like a drug. And it's one of the most sedated ways to become trapped inside yourself. It usually sounds like this: I just need to, and then I will finally be ready to. So the next time you hear yourself say, I just, perhaps it's a big indicator that you're justing yourself, putting yourself in the game of nearly. Another way we can look at it is like this. Most high achievers live in a perpetual almost. It's like they're always one move away, and then that move becomes the next move. So then take notice the next time you're at the end of a goal and suddenly your interest in other projects becomes more appealing. The urge to revisit one more thing or refine something over and over becomes the trap of never finishing. Here we can end up starting more than we ever complete. It's like we bench ourselves, being a person with extraordinary potential, with a complicated relationship with follow-through. It might seem like this is how creative people work, but the almost done trap is getting this regular attention inside this hustle culture. And why is this? Well, because it's profitable. It's profitable for you to be in a displaced of almost, not sure, one more step. The words just and almost link because they both signify nearly. And that's what makes us buy into productivity. We become afraid of what will happen if we stopped. And this is kind of why success can feel empty. Have you ever been so excited about that supposed life-changing event? The ones where we put our lives on hold to reach. The driver's license, the university degree, the savings for the house deposit. The list goes on, and yours will be unique to you. But how often do those milestone moments that took years to reach end up feeling less than expected, with less ceremony, and you're already looking ahead for the next thing? It's a predictable consequence of confusing pursuit, productivity, and destination. Because success often feels like this empty structural reason when we begin. We build an identity around getting somewhere. And the striving becomes the biggest part of the narrative. It's the internal story that organizes your productivity, your mornings, and your self-concept. It's what drives us to make those things. It's the grind in which we spend most of our time. So when you arrive, though, the narrative loses its engine. And without an engine, there's nothing humming in the background, which is why, as humans, we're not very good at tolerating the no sound. So your mind has a grip on unfinished things. It's a psychological phenomenon. In the 1920s, psychologist Bloomer Zygarnik noticed a waiter could recall complex unpaid orders, but the moment that those orders were paid, the waiter forgot those details. And this is the Zygarnik effect in action. And what it means is that as humans, in our minds, the hum disappears when we achieve our goals. And this is why we need to take precautions also with our desires. So theverywellmind.com speaks to this in their blog about the Zygarnik effect on memory. Inside the blog, they mention that the Zeigarnik effect is not always beneficial. When you do not complete tasks, they weigh heavily on your mind, and they create this level of stress. The stress is invasive and can lead to anxiety and affect your sleep, which we all know too well goes hand in hand with the pressures that we put on ourselves to achieve. There's also a grimmer possibility. What if the reason that you want to be so productive has nothing to do with the goal that you're trying to achieve? In coaching, this becomes clear as day. When you really drill down to why we want to achieve the things we do, chasing goals for approval, safety, or to prove our worth is a losing game because it has no external achievement that will actually provide that for you. And this comes back to watching others brag about external success while feeling internal dissatisfaction. We do not know the full story behind every person's online success. Those who are standing where you want to be have their own nervous systems on fire in the background. So we have to really look at what is fueling our productivity grip to succeed. Ask any high achiever what drives them, and they'll tell you it's all about their vision. But underneath that vision is something running much deeper, and it's usually fear. This fear can take the form of being fearful of being irrelevant, being ordinary, being seen as someone who could achieve so much more but didn't, or it could be the fear of a psychologically version of themselves that they're trying to escape from, that there's this fear they'll return to. Fear is an effective fuel. It creates urgency where none exists. It transforms rest into danger, and it makes stillness feel impossible. But if we look from the outside, it looks like passion, and it works right up until it doesn't, right up until the body protests, the relationships suffer, and our wins stop producing the relief that we're so used to. And you realize that you've been running in a race that has no finish line, powered by emotions that you were never supposed to run on for that long. The problem with using fear as a fuel is that it demands a mental story to sustain itself. The story is that of not enough, not doing enough, not built enough, not proven enough to be able to be out there and doing the things that you want to be doing. See, fear needs you to stay behind so it can keep driving you forward, which means a fear-driven life has a terrible incentive. Do not let yourself feel okay. So high achievers powered by fear are skilled at finding evidence that they should still be afraid. And they discount their wins and magnify their gaps. They find people who are further ahead of them and use that as proof that they're not good enough. I've certainly found those challenges. But are we ultimately running from ourselves? There is a psychology inside high achievers where they are running away from an earlier version of themselves. Sometimes it's specific self, like the kid who was told they wouldn't amount to much, or the person who was publicly humiliated, or the version of us that felt broke, overlooked, or dismissed. But sometimes it can be vaguer. It can be that we feel this sense of a limited life, or like we're settling. The ambition is real, but also so is the part of flight. And yes, we're talking about the nervous system flight. And flight has a particular quality. It lands somewhere else. You can't outrun your past self because your past self isn't behind you. It's inside of you. The feeling of earning your place in the world doesn't disappear once you've proved that you earned it. It updates, it resets the bar, and it finds new versions of yourself that it sends you towards. It perpetuates this feeling. But outrunning your past self is exhausting because you're running in circles. The finish line is like this illusion that disappears as you approach it. The effort, the results, everything you do are real, but the underlying problem is that we won't be satisfied with being there because the promise can't be kept. Not by achievement anyway. But here's where it gets really interesting. If the fear is shaped by your upbringing, your nervous system, or the early experiences that you were taught, achievement was something to feel safe with, then are you really choosing to run on it? Well, that's not a rhetorical question. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet put this to the test in the 1980s. He found that brain activity related to a physical movement began 550 milliseconds before people reported consciously deciding to move. So the brain had already initiated the process before the conscious mind had registered a decision. Sam Harris took this a little bit further in his book Free Will. He argues that the thoughts and intentions driving our actions arise from neural processes we have no conscious access to. And if that's true, the fear driving productivity is an output of the system that you were handed. But philosopher Daniel Bennett pushes back in Freedom Evolves. He doesn't believe that we have unlimited choice, but he argues something more useful, that free will and destiny can coexist. So what that means is that there is a massive openness to whether we have free will or whether things are already determined. And no one has that the answer to that question, but you only have to look at the story of two people who had the same father, who was an alcoholic. And one becomes an alcoholic and the other does not. And when the question is asked, why are you like that? The alcoholic son says, well, have you seen my father? And then the one that doesn't drink says, well, have you seen my father? I'm sure you know that story, but this is a clear indication of that free will versus determinism. The most important thing here is to act as the person you actually are. And the key word is act. When we think about how we act, it depends on the situation and the context that we're in. See, any of the actors that we're playing of ourselves, whether that be daughter, mother, the list goes on, I can't think of many. But when you are in a role of acting, it's role played from our experiences. So that's one to ponder for a while, that when you know who you are, it's that congruent version of acting that comes forward, that it feels alive, that it feels right. But we're all just acting on patterns and ways of operating that we've seen. But the most effective productivity systems have always assumed that we need that support. A calendar assumes that you'll forget. A checklist assumes you'll miss an item or two. A habit tracker assumes that motivation will disappear. So the very productivity tools that we know to rely on are the ones that we understand that we are people with different causes. They're made for what people are dealing with, whether it's in their mind, their feelings, or their past. So before you turn this into a reason to beat yourself up, stop. Because the most useful question isn't why can't I make this work, but what conditions would make an outcome more likely? Because we actually have cognitive limits. And this is something that the hustle culture doesn't provide awareness to. This is not a simple matter of discipline willpower. There is a hard science that applies directly to how the hustle culture operates. Cognitive load shows us that our working memory is limited in both capacity and duration. George Miller's 1956 research suggested that humans can roughly hold 7 chunks of information in our working memory. But more recent estimates from cognitive scientist Nelson Cohen places the limit closer to 4. Now consider what the hustle culture is actually trying to ask you to carry. The engine every time is running, every time you open your phone, to be doing more, to be optimizing more, to make it all better. But if you watch 8 reels, then you have already lost the information mentioned in the first one. So no wonder our brains feel overwhelmed. Your brain was never built to hold this level of nervous system attack. And no amount of discipline, new productivity hack, or color-coded calendar will change the hard limits of human cognition. So what actually works? Well, we have to strip it back, like anything. In automations, that's 101. What part can be deleted? That is the gold. Your 20% is the set of activities that actually drive your results. By now, you've probably heard of the 80-20 rule. Your 20% is the set of activities that drive your results, rather than the 80% that we spend in real nightmare. But it's different for everyone, which is precisely why no template can define it for you. Your 20% is a small set of activities that will actually drive your results. For some, that might be client delivery. For others, it might be sales conversation, content creation, or product development. It looks different for everyone, which is precisely why no single template can define it for you. You have to do the honest work of identifying what it is for you that's going to be that 20% that makes all the difference. And once you know the 20%, you go from how do I be productive starts being how do I spend more time in the 20% rather than everywhere else. Before you add another tool, another template, or buy another course, there are 3 things you should ask yourself before you make that decision. Number 1, do you have an existing system and are you actually using it consistently? If not, adding another layer will compound the problem, not solve it. Number 2, what specific problem are you trying to remove? If you cannot name it precisely, then you are shopping for a feeling rather than solving a problem. That's why we open our phones. We're shopping for that feeling of being productive. But again, your cognitive load won't do anything with that because you can't hold all of that information. So number 3, what will it cost you in time and cognitive load to implement and maintain this? Every new system carries a tax. Just make sure that the returns justify it. But there's another piece here that's worth mentioning, that productivity is a form of avoidance. There is a cultural conspiracy set out by the hustle culture that to be productive is to be worthy. To rest is to waste your time. And to sit still just suddenly means that we're falling behind. And high achievers absorb this conspiracy early and completely. And they use it to stay above water. Because when you're moving, you do not have to notice what's underneath. Productivity is the most sociably acceptable form of avoidance available to intelligent people. No one stages an intervention because you work too hard. But what are we avoiding? Well, usually it's the conversation that we should be having, but we're afraid of. Here comes the fear again. Or it's the grief that we've been putting off feeling, the busyness that hides the loneliness. It fills the space before the icky things can surface, and so it does so efficiently, wearing the face of someone who has their life all put together. Achievements are external. It can be photographed. It's a metric we can measure. It can be announced and marked against the rest of the world. Achievement is what happens when you complete the thing the world can see. But fulfillment is very different. It's internal. It has no metric. It cannot be photographed. It can be felt in a sense of a life that is lived in alignment with something that actually matters. Not to your industry, not to others, but to you. The question is simple. By whose standards are you measuring your life? Hustle culture ain't it. The design feature of human psychology, particularly with people who have learned to locate their sense of safety and achievement, find it very difficult to not have a goal because the goal is necessary. Without it, there's nowhere to land our arrival. But the goal is never really the real purpose. The purpose is to have the feeling that we have arrived. And arrival is a fallacy. Philosopher Tal Ben-Shahar named this so well. The arrival fallacy. The belief is that when we reach a goal, we will produce this lasting transformation in how you will feel about yourself and your life. But it won't. And some part of you already knows this because you've arrived at points of previous goals and felt that brief flicker of satisfaction and then moved further ahead to the next line in the goal, the next step. So it's worth slowing down because this really reframes something important. If arrival was never going to deliver what you thought it would, then how you live your life in getting there between events becomes the juice of the experience. Do high achievers struggle to enjoy their lives? Well, enjoyment requires presence, and presence requires the ability to stop scanning for what's next, what's wrong, or what needs fixing. High achievers are almost by definition excellent scanners. It's what makes them so effective, but it's also what makes simple enjoyment rather difficult. The machinery that serves ambition works against you in a sunset, the dinner table, the conversation when you're with someone you love, because there's what's underneath. The problem of enjoying, for many high achievers, carries a faint shame of guilt, a suspicion that enjoying the present moment is complacency, that the people who are fully present, who have given up on becoming exceptional. But this is bullshit and something that the hustle culture wants us to believe. It's why holidays turn into work trips, relationships turn into maintenance, and the downtime that becomes secretly more about recovering for the next sprint. The tragedy is not that high achievers don't have good lives. Often they have extraordinary ones by any material sense. The tragedy is in the inability to inhabit the lives that they're living, to actually feel like they're living their life without immediately converting it into motivation, content, or evidence towards a larger thesis of what it all really means. Enjoyment is not for the reward of achievement, and it's definitely not something that you earn by suffering enough for first. So how do we optimize and accomplish things without all of that? Well, hustle culture carries a promise that if you just optimize hard enough, that you can produce without limit, and that rest is inefficient, and slowing down means that you're falling behind. But this has nothing to do with ambition. It is a critical, misguided error, sold by those who want you to believe their pipe dream by sending money down it. What if the energy you are pouring into becoming productive is the very thing standing between you and being productive? There is nothing wrong with wanting to grow, to improve, or to build something significant. That's what this channel is all about. But that drive is a genuine asset. But the moment that drive turns into a form of self-punishment, then the belief that we're perpetually behind, that we're perpetually not living up to some invisible standard, that we're consuming more content, does not close the gap. It stops serving you because you are serving it. So the whole picture is this. Hustle culture isn't making you more productive. It's making you better at performing the activity of worker. And there's a significant difference. The almost done trap keeps you busy, but never allows you to finish. And the Zeigarnik effect explains why that hum eventually disappears. And the goals that you're grinding towards, well, the brain may act before the conscious decision is formed. But the more useful freedom comes from acting as the person you actually are once you know who that is. Your working memory has a hard limit. Hustle culture blows past that daily. The most productive people aren't doing more. They've identified their 20% and protect it from everything else. The question was never actually how to do more. The arrival fallacy will keep moving the finish line. But the good life is to be in it, rather than optimizing it through a spreadsheet. Because if we can't switch off to the hums of thousands of other people, no wonder we feel as sick and in this epidemic of hustle that we do now.